Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to start with the new topic comparative politics, nature, and major approaches. So, comparative politics is the study and appraisal of domestic politics across countries. So, in short, it means the comparative study of different polities of different countries. In other words, it is comparison of polities or political systems of different countries. Then the ancient Greeks, they performed the earliest systematic comparison of a more modern and secular polity. Comparative polity, it is the study of domestic politics, political institution, and conflict of countries, and it often encompasses comparison among countries through time within single countries, emphasizing major patterns of similarity and difference. So here, one may ask the question, why is the comparison necessary? So comparison is there to to figure out major patterns in polities, major patterns in political activity, patterns in political system, and to find out similarities and differences, so that such lessons they can be integrated into the political system of a particular country. And it is also necessary because the lessons they do not just trace themselves or do not just limit themselves up to certain technical standards. By technical standards, I mean technical fields such as biology, medicine, electronic gadgets, mining, construction. Such technical fields they need such further and recurrent upgradations of lessons. But such lessons they can also be learned in political system, because political, as you know, polity itself, it is the study of what is common across people. And for that matter, politics cannot be given a stepchild treatment. Then many political theorists like Aaron Liphard, he argued that comparative politics does not have a functional focus in itself, instead a methodological one. So in simple form, it means comparative politics is not defined by the object of a study, but by the method it applies to study political phenomena. So here in this definition, there are two complexes. The first one is the object of study of comparative politics. So the object here is political institution. In short, it can be grouped as political system. Comparative politics, it studies political systems of different countries, which is its object. So it is not the core feature here, and it is not the study of comparative politics is not limited by the reason of political system or by the differences or the clarifications of them. It is, by which I mean comparative politics, it is a method that concern what methods, what approaches are applied to study it. Well, certain complex definition take time for simplification. So again, I make another attempt. Comparative politics is not defined, is not limited to the study of political system. So by this particular line, by this particular sentence, it is meant that comparative politics is not about just studying or just listing the differences among various political systems, but what methods have been employed to study such political phenomena. Because the method themselves, they will they will ensure that such comparison, it has a fruitful results. Because it has been shown here that comparative politics has an objective, which is to find the trends, to find the similarities and differences. This objective is needed to be achieved, and there is no single, or there is not one shot or one approach that can find all the available similarities and differences or the major patterns. So there are various methods, and those methods, they will help us arrive at you know multiple interpretations, and those multiple interpretations are what the trends, the patterns that we are looking for. Then Peter Meyer and Richard Rose, they gave modern definition of comparative politics and stated that comparative politics is elaborated by a combination of substantive focus on the study of countries' political system and a method of recognizing and explaining similarities and differences between these countries using common models. So again, the definition, however elaborate, it talks about the core and essential features, that comparative politics is the study of political system of different countries, and the aim for such a study is to know the similarities and differences and to arrive at patterns. Then, in the fields of comparative politics, the term politics has three connotations. The first one is political activity, then political process, and political power. So, political activity, it consists of efforts by which conditions of conflict, they are created and resolved. So, now, political activity itself is both the source and solution for any conflict. Source and solution. So, in this case, how can political activity be a source of conflict? It is because if there are laws, if there are rules, which even if they cater to certain population, they often alienate other populations. This is one classical case. Second case will be maldistribution or uneven distribution of resources between different regions and geographies that also create conflict. Third, the uneven distribution or uneven bestowing of privileges, which themselves are another source of conflict. So all the sources of such political activities, the political activity will manifest themselves, like in the democratic country, they will manifest in terms of demonstration, in sit-ins, dharna, protest. So here, the source, it has been highlighted that political activity, because of its nature, because the power it controls, the political power, the financial power it controls, the power of influence, the power of coercion it controls, it can skew the balance in 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 terms of geography, in terms of people, in terms of different classes. And then it is the same political activity in terms of demonstration, protests that are there to resolve such conflict. Then political process is the extension of political activity. So process, it does not need further explanation because it is the process by which political activities are performed. So in a way, distribution of resources, the expenditure of budget procedures, and the granting of privileges, the passing of law, all of them, they are political process. And the same way, peaceful demonstration, peaceful protest, sit-ins, they are also political process. So you can say political process is the extension of political activity. Then political power is the major topic in comparative politics, and it has been defined in various ways. One such writer, Friedrich, he described power as a certain kind of human relationship, whereas another political scientist, Tony, he explained power as a capacity of an individual or a group of individuals to modify the conduct of other individuals in a way he desires. So in short, the definition of Tony, in simple word, it means political power is the power of influence. and it is the power which can influence decisions on all level, not only at individual level but collective level such as regional level, national level, international level. Then let's have a look at nature of comparative politics. So in terms of comparison of political system of different countries, there are two terms, comparative politics and comparative government, that are used interchangeably, but there is a distinction between them. Comparative government, it includes the study of features and legal power of political institutions, and whereas comparative politics, it is more comprehensive one, wherein it includes other non-formal institutions as well. So those institutions which are not political in nature, but which also hold a sway, which also pressurizes, lobbies, or influences polity in one way or another, those institutions, those informal institutions are also taken into account. Then the key characteristic of comparative government, they are it stresses upon the study of political institution, which means the formal institution. Then it focuses on the study of major constitutions of world. It emphasizes upon the study of power and function of different various political institutions in different countries, and it confined itself to formal study of organizations and power by describing the feature of constitutions and political institutions and delineating the legal power of various constitutions. And finally, it tries to devise a theory of ideal political institutions, which is also its objective. So these are the core features of comparative government, and these traits they made comparative government a popular area of study during the beginning of 20th century. Subsequently, majority of political scientists they were displeased with the narrow scope, the formal scope, the intuitive methodology, and the formal legalistic institutional and normative approach. All of such lacunas they were overcome by adopting comprehensiveness, realism, precision, and scientific study of process, which culminated in the creation of comparative politics. So basically, the study of comparative politics it involves mindful comparison in studying political experiences, institutions, behavior, and process of major systems of government across the world. It comprises the study of even extra constitutional agencies along with formal. So comparative politics, when I say it has really the progress, really updated itself from the study of comparative government, it has integrated a study of informal agencies as well. Then it is also concerned with important regularities, similarities and differences. Then it studies political behavior as well. So consequently, comparative politics it can be defined as a subject to compare the political system in various parts of the globe. So here, the umbrella term political system it includes all the entities, all the actors, whether they are formal, informal, individual, or group. Then let's have a look at some popular definitions of comparative politics. So according to John Blondel, comparative politics is the study of patterns of national government in the contemporary world. So where I am just narrating or reciting what is already mentioned here, and most of the definition they do not need further explanation. But even then, I'm going to narrate the whole sentences so that if there comes any topic, any term that needs explanation, I'm here for that. M.G. Smith, he described that comparative politics is the study of forms of political organizations, their properties, correlations, variations, and modes of change. And all these definitions, they say the same thing, but the portray is different. It's like different artists working on the same sketch. So they will they will have uh, some differences, or you can say some diversity. from the works of others. So E.F. Freeman he stated that comparative politics is the comparative analysis of various forms of government and diverse political institutions. So here the key terms are the same. That comparative politics it is about the comparison of political system of different countries, and political system, an umbrella term, it encompasses both the formal institution as well as various informal institutions. So here it can be established as comparative politics encompasses the comparative study of not only institutional and mechanistic arrangements, but also an empirical and scientific investigation of non-institutionalized and non-political determinants of political behavior. So overall, the meaning of uh, this passage is highlighting the degree by which comparative politics it has upgraded from its parent organization or its parent term, the comparative government. So the differences or the degree by which it has progressed, they have been listed here. The first one is that it is not only studying the institutional and mechanistic arrangement, which is the formal polity. And formal polity itself means government, the government that is elected by people. So comparative polity is not only studying such formal polity, but this method it also integrates an empirical and scientific investigation of non-institutionalized and non-political determinants. So other informal actors, they have also been studied and their political behavior have also been integrated. Now, next paragraph, comparative politics is pigeonholed by numerous features. Pigeonhole is synonymous with categorization. So in another way, comparative politics is categorized by numerous features, which are the first one is it is analytical and empirical research. Then it is objective study of politics rather than the normative or subjective study of comparative government. Then it studies the infrastructure of politics, which means it now analyzes the actual behavior of individuals, of group structure, of subsystems and system in relation to the political environment. So it studies the actual behavior of all entities, all the actors involved. Then it is also interested in interdisciplinary focus. So it focuses upon interdisciplinary approach by which it studies other social sciences like psychology, sociology, anthropology, economics. Then it studies political processes in both developed and developing countries. So by which it implicitly highlight the fact that the earlier study, the parent organization, the parent branch, it only concerned itself with the developed countries, by which I mean the comparative government. So now comparative politics, it studies all kinds of countries, whether rich or poor, whether developed or developing, whether from north or south. So here, this political system of Asia, Africa, and Latin America, the countries of global south, they also enjoy equal importance with the study of African and European political system. Then theory building as the objective. Yes. So the aim or the objective of comparative politics is the building of a scientific theory, a making of a scientific theory by finding the trends and the patterns. Then finally, adoption of political systems. Now let's have a look at the major approaches of comparative politics. So conventionally or traditionally, the study of comparative politics is termed as comparative government, and this need no further highlighting, no further elaboration because this have been explained and narrated many a time. But still, I'll proceed with it. Comparative government it includes the study of political institutions existing in various states. The features, advantage, demerits, similarities, and dissimilarities of political institutions were compared. But comparative government, it only compares political institutions. Then, in the 20th century, the study of political government underway revolutionary changes after Second World War. So the traditional focus of study of politics, it got substituted by the new scope, methodology, concepts and techniques which were known as contemporary review of study of politics. And such contemporary review, when integrated in comparative politics, they espouse comprehensiveness, realism, practicality, pragmatism, precision, and use of scientific method to study comparative politics. And this endeavor is nowadays promoted as modern comparative politics. In the modern assessment, the scope of comparative politics is much wider, and this wider scope has already been mentioned. This includes analysis and comparison of actual behavior of political structure, whether formal or informal. So even if I have mentioned the differences between comparative politics and comparative government many a time, yet I keep highlighting, I keep narrating them so that it become integrated to, it become normalized in your mental framework, so that you do not need that recurrent revision to understand the basic concept. Now, both traditional and modern comparative politics, they adopt different approaches to study. Traditional scientists, they follow narrow and normative approach. Normative, it means subjective. So when I say subjective, or when subjective or normative approach uh, is pinned down under any study, it involves that while studying a particular concept, the actual thought, the personal belief, the notions, the prejudices, the stereotype, and the knowledge of the researchers, they have a high degree of influence on the study. I repeat again, whenever normative concepts come in, it means there are no objective parameters. So any concept that is studied by any researchers, if that study is normative, it means the personal beliefs, the personal value system, the um, prejudices, the stereotypes, the mental framework, all will have a strong influence on the study and outcome of that particular concept. And again, the traditional comparative politics, it involved descriptive study with a legal institutional framework and normative prescriptive focus. So again, it means that they were confined to the formal institutions and they were subjective studies, whereas modern political scientists, they follow empirical, which means objective study, analytical studies, which means the personal prejudices, stereotypes, mental frameworks, and beliefs were not taken into account. In short, personal biases will not influence the outcome, so that the study will be objectified, will be analyzed in a scientific manner, in a process-oriented or behavioral focus. So these scientific principles will be employed, and they analyze and compare empirically the actual behavior of political structure. So this is it. Now let's proceed on with the traditional approaches. So the traditional approach was predominant till the occurrence of Second World War. Consequently, traditional approaches are principally concerned with the study of organization and activity of state, and the principle and idea which motivates political organization. So in short, the traditional approach, they were limited to the study of formal institutions. They were normative study again. The same thing is being repeated. And the political philosopher of that time, They raise such questions such as what should be an ideal state. And according to them, the study of political science, it should be limited to the formal structure of government, of rules, laws, and regulation. So therefore, the supporter of traditional approaches, they stress various norms such as what should be, what kind of a state it should be, what kind of a state it ought to be, what kind of a rules, what kind of polity should be or must be, rather than actually studying what it is in the present circumstances. Then characteristic of traditional approaches are normative and they stresses on value of politics. Then prominence is on study of different formal political structures. Then they made very little attempt to relate theory and research. And then they consider, since facts and values are closely interlinked, studies in political science can never be scientific. So these are the major characteristic of traditional approaches, and I don't think you need further explanation on any of these sentences. Yes, the third one, the traditional approaches made very little attempt to relate theory and research, and the answer of which is eminent here, which is they structured their studies in terms of what it should be. So it was a desirable framework that they sought while studying, not what it actually was. So even if they were studying the formal structure, their idea in the back of their mind was the desirable characters. So in that way, the theory and research, theory means what they had in their mind and research is what they did. They made little attempt to relate both the events. So, and because in the back of their mind they had some definite idea of desirable characteristic, whereas the actuality it was different from what they found. But finally, their motive was to find a desirable, or you can say a likable or a should be state rather than what it is the state. Then there are many traditional approaches. First, the philosophical approach. So philosophical approach is customarily a study of politics. It was subjugated by philosophical reflections on universal political value that were regarded as essential to the just state and good state. Yes, so here this third characteristic, it finds its explanation here that one of the traditional approach, this philosophical approach, it went into and it was mired into the philosophical idea so much so that it did not see what actually lied in front of it. They believed and they regarded that there are some essential criteria of a good and just state, and they were looking for them. And in reality, it could have been different, and it was different. When we study world history, we find that the older institution, older polity of different country, different empire, they they were never near to the utopian idea espoused by this such philosophical approach. Then the oldest approach to the study of politics is the philosophical. Philosophy is the study or science of truth of principle that underlies all knowledge and being. So in one way or another, philosophy is the study of a truth principle, a study of the principle that govern knowledge. Then the main aim of philosophical approach is to evaluate the consequences of an event in a logical and scientific manner. Van Dyck, he opined that philosophy denotes thought about thought. And some broader definition, it denotes general conception of ends and means, purpose, and methods. So the purpose of philosophical approach is to explain the words and terms used by political theories. And I guess this paragraph, this passage needs further explanation. So this first sentence, it says that the main objective of philosophical approach, it was to scientifically study the political consequences or the political decisions, political activities. So, uh, in this particular way, it is not different from the modern approaches, because modern approaches, modern comparative politics, also studies political activity in a scientific manner. But then, the key difference between philosophical approach and modern comparative politics is it lies in what part of political activity is being studied. So the philosophical approach, it studied the consequences of events, whereas modern comparative politics, it studies all kinds of political activity from beginning to the end in an objective and unbiased way. So what was the reason for the philosophers of that time, philosophers of that time, to evaluate the consequences? Because first, we are talking about traditional philosophers, traditional political philosophers. And at that time, many of them, they were concerned about the consequences, the outcome of political events, so that uh, if the outcomes, if they can be traced via various events that led to it, they can arrive at what lied and what was the reason for such an outcome or such a consequence. Then, when Dijk, he opined that philosophy denotes thought about thought. So philosophy, as I've said, it is the study of knowledge, the study of principles that govern knowledge. In that way, it is also a study about thought and thought. So here, the the thoughts that are being talked about are the thoughts that breeds actions, and those actions, they lead to experiences in form of outcomes and consequences, and those experiences, they lead to knowledge. In other words, the first idea of any action, it germinates in someone's mind. This thought, this idea, it leads to action, and this idea or this thought, it can be a single an individual endeavor or a collective one. Like when we are talking about the Greek and Roman Empire, we are also talking about democracy and republic. So in another way, we are talking about the group decisions, and those group decisions could only be taken when all the people, they try to think around the same line. Then such multitude of idea, they were, when taken into account, when they were given a coherent form, those ideas, they were led to actions. So let's take example of a decision of an imminent threat. So this threat, it was perceived by various members of republic, the then republic of Greek and Roman Empire. And when they finally arrived, when this collective body finally arrived by integration of by introspection of various thoughts, and they arrive that yes, it is time for them to take an action, and such action, it could only be possible via first germination of such idea. So thought, it led to action, then their action, it led to some experience, because if you act according to the third law of motion, it will have some reaction or some outcome. So such outcome, this will have consequences, this will bring some changes, and those changes will lead to the study of knowledge. So this particular point, the experience leading to knowledge, It's like shaking up a giant tree. So when you shake a giant tree, something is bound to happen. It might be that the leaves that are dried up, they may fall down. The fruits that are ripened, they may fall down. You may, you know, startle some animals that dwell in those, in that tree. Whichever it is, if you put in some action, something will happen, and that something will be studied. Because here, the object of knowledge is to find the pattern. Most of the study, even in the present time, like uh, chat GPT, such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, the meta surfaces, you may have heard about big data, big analysis, big analytics. So all of such endeavors, all of them, they are just finding patterns. So in traditional approach, those pattern they talk about, or they included a very wider canvas. But in the present time, these uh, technological breakthroughs, they are finding patterns at micro level. So this is the difference. The more we progress, the the more progress will be made in finding patterns both at micro and macro level. Anyway, in short, the gist of the whole explanation was that the philosophers of that time, they tried to find the patterns in the political activities of that time, and according to them, the root area or the root actor of such pattern finding activity was thought. Then the uh, the middle sentence, some broadly says the philosophical tradition, it denotes general conception of ends and means, purpose and methods. So again, it is about studying what has happened, and the purpose of philosophical approach is to explain the words and terms used by political theories, which is not difficult to understand. Then the next paragraph, several Greek philosophers such as Plato and Aristotle were the creators of this approach, this traditional philosophical approach. And the main subject of Plato's writing was to define the nature of an ideal society. So again, a normative approach, a utopian vision, and an idealization. So this approach, it states that values are inseparable from facts. So that's why traditional approach, it does not see any differences between values and facts. And it is also an ethical and normative study of politics. So by which it is concerned with what a state should be or ought to be rather than what it is in present. Then this approach, it seeks to understand our fundamental nature and aim as human beings, recognizing principles and standards of right conduct in political life. So it is normative in character and believes in developing norms and standards. So these are another characteristic of philosophical school, that they espouse some standards for right conduct in political life. Then the benefit of philosophical approach is that it enters into depth of every aspect of political phenomena and examine them without any partiality. And this approach, it also enhances linguistic clarity. This is why it is said that this approach aims at thought about thought, because the more we try to find the pattern, and the patterns are found only when we trace every node in the chain of events, and ultimately you will end up that the first chain or the first node of the chain, it was someone's brain. It was someone's brain from which some thoughts um, rose up, and those thoughts then led to actions, those various chains of action, and those chains of action led to some or other outcome, and those outcome, it's a study, it completes this feedback loop of philosophy. Then the philosophical approach, it uses procedure of logical analysis. It uses reason to explore the truth, and the truth which this approach established may be of various kind: normative, descriptive, and prescriptive truth. So the meaning of this paragraph is that philosophical approach, which deals about both thought and knowledge and standard, it is ought to follow a logical analysis. Because if you want to know the truth, you need to trace all the events. And when you trace all the events, you reason about the occurrence of such an event or such group of events. And this logical analysis is incomplete without reason. Then the truth, different kind: normative, descriptive, and prescriptive. These are these truth are in some interchangeable terms. Normative is about subjective truth. So, as you know, truth cannot be subjective. Truth is truth. But here, this categorization, it it puts the very definition of truth in jeopardy. Why is that so? Because we have always considered that truth is one such entity. But philosophical approach, it is not about the actual truth. It is talking about the interpretations of truth. Interpretation in the way that what truth is according to the subject who is espousing such a truth. In a way, if you are able to recall the general theory of relativity given by Albert Einstein, so this relative term, even at the astronomical scale, even at cosmological scale, this relativity is always there. That truth according to one can be different from the truth that is seen by another. So uh, the real truth, it always has some distinction in terms of interpretations. So in short, what you see is one truth, and what I see is another truth. And even if we two join our truth, then the third person may have different kind of truth, and which may be different just by a single iota from what we consider as truth. But still, that just iota of difference will be considered as a truth. Now, normative truth means subjective truth. So, in a case when the details of any events are not known, and especially if the details are not known in clarity, in that case, the occurrence of any event and the outcome of which, if both of them analyze events and outcome, when both of them analyze and you finally come at a conclusion, that conclusion with the absence of event that led to such an outcome will give you a normative truth. So, for example, someone threw a stone in a still body of water, let's say pond. So, when the stone is thrown, you will see ripples. So, here, what you know is that the event, which is the activity, uh, throwing of stone, then the outcome, which is rippling of water body, both of which led you to arrive at this conclusion that when you throw a stone in a still body, there will be ripples. Now, the normative structure of truth is you don't know why the subject, why the actor threw the stone in this water body. And then there are many conditions, such as why is the structure of pond in this particular way? Why does the stone it create ripples? What is the role of various climatic and atmospheric phenomena? Then let's have a look at descriptive. So in descriptive truth, when you get to the depth of all the events concerned in all possible manner, Then you consider all the facts that I listed here. And why is the pond in this particular shape? Why did the actor throw a stone in this pond? What are the role of various climatic phenomena? What comes? What happens when the day is windy? When there is already shower or rain? When the pond it is littered with debris. So various other alternatives and various other conditions are considered in depth. And when you arrive uh, at a conclusion after much discussion, after much in-depth study, that is known as descriptive. And prescriptive truth is about how people should behave. If any actor, any subject should throw a stone in water body, what should be the size of stone that should be thrown in the water body? What should be the ideal time of throwing stone? How should the events be recorded? How should person should behave? What should be the logical sequence of event that one should follow in life so that one is able to peacefully throw a stone in water? And such prescription they form the elements of prescriptive truth. Then this approach also tries to establish standards of good, right, and just. Then in the contemporary Greek city-states of Plato, morality, moral value, and idealism, they were ruined to such an extent that he received a great shock and seriously thought to recuperate these, and this urge encouraged him to write the Republic. The meaning of which is, when Plato saw the moral decadence, the moral decay of the society in which he lived, he wanted to rejuvenate. He wanted to recover. Recuperate means recover this society, and for which he wrote his famous work, The Republic. And an ideal and moral body politic can be made a real one through the selfless administration by a philosopher king. So this is believed by Plato. So the meaning of which is, a philosopher king means a well-studied, well-knowledgeable king. He can make such utopian idea, such idealistic idea into the real one. He can apply such ideals into real life through selfless administration. Then John Locke, another philosopher, he composed his second treatise to rationalize the interest and objective of new middle class and the struggle of people for liberty. Then other political philosophers such as Machiavelli and Hobbes, they also wrote to support royal absolutism, which means the royal right for absolute power. Then it is established that a philosophical approach that helps people to understand the contemporary history and nature of politics as suggested by philosophers. In other words, the philosophical approach aids to comprehend the political ideology of past centuries. Then the normative philosophical approach is the ancient and the least scientific study to, to the study of politics. So both these terms that are not difficult to understand. Now let's have a look at the criticism. So the central idea of political philosophy is idealism, and it is conspicuous in Plato's The Republic. So critics argue that idealism itself is quite good, but it cannot be considered in practical situation. So in practical situation, it will become a myth. So Plato emphasized idealism in his theory, but it has no practical bias. Then the philosophical intellectuals of earlier period were impractical philosophers, and even if they espoused those idea, they had no intention to promulgate or to integrate those ideas to change society. So in one way, as an academic discipline, philosophical approach is appropriate, but in practical guides for action, it barely has any importance. Now let's have a look at historical approach. So this approach states that political theory can only be understood when the historical factors are taken into account. So this highlights the study of history of every political reality to analyze any situation. So the difference between historical approach and philosophical approach, both of them they are talking about the tracing of events, the tracing of chain of event. So the philosophical approach, it is tracing the events ultimately to the actor, to thoughts of the actor, whereas the historical approach, it tracing the political actions, political activities and outcomes by looking at the historical lens. So many political theories such as Machiavelli, Sabine, Dunning, they believe that politics and history are strongly interlinked, and politics should always have a historical viewpoint. And it is also believed that without studying the past political events, the analysis of present would be imperfect. So in another way, it is that if you want to know the exact intensity of the present events, you must study the past polity. Main attributes of historical approach is that history as a written or recorded subject, it focuses on the past events. So from history, researcher they come to know how man was in past and how he is now. How what event led men from the past event to the present event. In other words, the present circumstances they have a precedent, they have a trigger and beginning in the past. So from the profiles, autobiographies and descriptions by author and journalists, investigators know what events occurred in the past and the significance they have in the present societies. And they also believe that history communicates researcher how government, political party, and many other institutions worked, their successes and failure from the historical lessons. Now, the evaluation of historical approach. So one of the main challenges is that history has two phases. The first challenge is the documentation of fact, which is quite naive. We do not believe if the historical facts that have been documented by various writers, various historical writers, various courtiers, and some of them were even financed by royal families and eminent person. But can they be considered at face value? Can they be considered authoritative? So this is the first problem. And then other problem is about construal of facts and phenomena, which it means that facts and phenomena, or in other words, interpretation. So whatever has been written in the historical document, first we are skeptic about their authority, and then even if we consider them while studying the past, the interpretation, it is subjective. The subjective interpretation of the writer himself. Then we need to arrive at some interpretation which will have some biases. So these are the two challenges that are associated with the historical approach. And the implication is that adequate care should be taken while evaluating evidence and fact, and such a caution is not always followed. As a result, the historical facts do not serve the purpose of those who use it. This is the main complaint against the historical approach to the study of politics. The meaning of which is, in simplification, is that first facts were historical evidences. They were written by someone, and we don't know under what circumstances, under what mental framework. Then the evaluation of those evidences, it should also be unbiased in an objective manner. But such objective evidence, such objective analysis is not followed, not strictly followed. So that's why even the already subject prone, already error prone historical evidences are further subjected to personal bias of the evaluator. And then what we finally see as historical evidence is not what happened, but the personal interpretation of what has occurred. So this is the main complaint because of which historical approach cannot be relied to. Alan Ball has also criticized the historical approach by debating that past evidence does leave alarming gaps, and political history is often simply a record of great men and great events rather than the comprehensive account of political activity. So this is another third criticism that the historical records we see now, all of them they record eulogies, record achievements of war and conquest, but seldom they are talking about the actual political activity with the rigor and the intensity of a political acumen, which is missing from historical evidences. Now, let's proceed on to the institutional approach. So, this institutional approach it deals with formal aspects of government and politics. So, by which it is concerned with the study of formal political structure such as legislature, executive, judiciary, and it focuses on the rules of political system, the powers of various institutions, the legislative body, and how the constitution works. And the main drawback of this approach was its narrow focus on formal structure and arrangements. So more concretely, institution in this particular approach has been regarded as offices and agencies that are associated with political activities. So all political offices and agencies, they are considered institutions of formal structure, and such formal aspects they have been studied by this particular approach. So the institutional approach to political analysis, it emphasizes on the formal structure and agencies of government. And it originally concentrated on the development and operation of legislature, executive, and judiciary, the three primary branches of government. But later on, it included other political organs such as political parties, constitutions, bureaucracies, interest groups, and other institutions. And the examination of institutional approach, they provide valuable insight as the organization can be drawn, proposal for reform and reforms they can also be taken into account. So in short, this means that the study of the outcome of the institutional approach by studying the structures, such such insights can help first in finding general conclusion, general pattern in various institutions, and then those patterns they can find major drawbacks, major areas of recovery, and then it can suggest many reforms in those political institutions. In this approach, it has been criticized for disregard for informal aspect of politics, such as individual norms, social beliefs, cultural values, group attitude, personalities, and processes. So, in short, the major criticism it is of this institutional approach is about ignoring the individual or informal aspects of politics. So these informal aspects they should be taken into account to give it a broader outlook. But in this lies the second criticism, which is that this approach has been criticized for being too narrow. It ignores the role of individual who are the main actor in both formal and informal structures. And the last criticism is that this approach it ignores the international politics. Now, the fourth approach, the legal approach. So, this legal approach, it considers the state as the central organization for creation and enforcement of law. And this approach is associated with legal process, legal bodies, institutions, and everything that is legal. So in this approach, the study of politics is mixed with legal processes and institutions. Themes of law and justice are treated not mere as affairs of jurisprudence. Rather, political scientists they look at state as the maintainer of effective and equitable system of law and order. So this legal approach, first, it look at all the legal dimension, which can be clubbed as legality. So all dimensions of legality, which include the legal processes, all the institutions that uphold law and order, and the working of all such legal principle, all such legal aspect, they are studied by this approach. And this approach treats the state primarily as an organization for creation and enforcement of law. So here, the lens by which legal approach looks at state is is of an institution that is limited, that is confined with the creation and enforcement of law. So what are other aspects of or other phases of state that are missing, that are being missed by this approach, which are: state is also a reformer, state is also a social institution, state is also actor at geopolitical level, state is also a persuader, such as in the case of the LPG Ujjwala scheme, in case of creating toilets in every home. Here, state convinced people in adopting such strategies. Then, in reformer, we have many institutions such as the abolition of untouchability, and in social sphere, you have uh, the affirmative action, the creation of government hospitals. Then it is also an act at various quasi-judicial body, various international groups, various bilateral and multilateral groupings. So the state is not just uh, a tool of law. Then, and the main supporter of this approach are Cicero, Bodin, Hobbes, John Austin, Dicey, and Henry Maine. In the system of Hobbes, the head of state is the highest legal authority, and his command is the law that must be obeyed either to avoid punishment to its subject or to keep this dreadful state of nature away. So this legal approach, it applies to national as well as international politics, and it stands on assumption that law, it prescribes action. So here it is mm, more concerned about the static actions, and which is not the case. Law is not everything, and people are not born out of law. It's the people who have created law. Law did not create people, but still we need to see what it is rather than what it should be. Then um, this assumption that law prescribe action to be taken in given contingency and forbid the same action in given circumstances. This is the basis of it, which means that law is is kind of a nudge that compel people to act in certain condition and to prohibit from them in another condition. And it also emphasized the fact that where the citizens are law abiding, the knowledge of law offers an important basis for prediction related to political behavior of people. So it also talks about finding predictions and pattern about political behavior of people. When this approach is narrow, law include only one aspect of people's life. It cannot cover the entire behavior of political action. And criticism of traditional approaches. The traditional approaches, they have gloomily unsuccessful to identify the role of individuals who are important in molding and remolding the nature of politics. Its focus was directed to the institutions while ignoring the role of individuals. And there are individuals who control the structure, functions, and various aspects of institutions that were the key highlight of traditional philosophies. Yet, it these traditional approaches, they have glaringly and visibly ignored the role of key actors that form all the institution. Then the other criticism is that traditional approaches are mainly descriptive And whereas politics, it does not rule out description, but it is also analytical. Sheer description of facts does not inevitably establish the subject matter of political science. The meaning of this passage is that traditional approaches, they clearly highlight what there is and what there should be. Means the structure, the institutions of government, but such description in itself is it not going to take political science or the study of politics anywhere. There need to be analysis. There need to be an element of pattern finding so that the analysis can act as template for the students of political science of a particular age. They can work upon them to find many area upon which to find their own niche. Then the standpoint of the traditionalist is limited within the institution. They have explored the role of environment into which is included international politics, multinational corporation, non-governmental organization, or transnational body. So here, this exploration or this expansion of the role of traditional body, it has been taken up by the modern comparative politics. Then it is assumed that traditional analysis is inappropriate for all types of political system, both Western and non-Western. And to recompense the deficiency, the political scientists of post-Cold War period have developed a general system approach which is quite comprehensive. So this paragraph, particularly it is talking about what comes here, the modern approaches. So to overcome the paucities or the difficulties, deficiencies of traditional approaches, they have arise many modern approaches which concern with scientific study of politics and the advent of actual study of actual behavior of people, leading to advent of behavior level revolution in political science. So what are the characteristics of modern approaches? First, they draw conclusion from empirical data. Then these approaches, they go beyond the study of political structure and historical analysis. Then these modern approaches believe in interdisciplinary studies, and then they stress scientific method of study to draw scientific conclusion in political science. So this is it. We'll talk about modern approaches in the next video. Thank you very much, and kindly subscribe the channel.